I'm wearing a clergy collar today. When you see someone dressed like this or wearing clergy robes, what comes to mind? My own relationship with clergy vestments is a little complicated. At one level, special clergy clothes are simply a uniform, marking someone as an ordained Christian minister. Throughout Anglican history, however, there has been disagreement among clergy of different theological persuasions about which clergy vestments are appropriate. My sympathies lie generally with those who argue that ministers should dress more plainly, avoiding any suggestion that clergy enjoy a different spiritual status from the congregation. I wonder what inadvertent messages we send today by wearing even the plainest clergy robes from the 16th and 17th centuries. What's more, that debate among Anglicans has been about distinguishing the Anglican Church from the Roman Catholic Church. You can imagine that for someone who spent 10 years as a missionary in Mexico, a majority Catholic country, being confused with a Roman Catholic priest feels a little awkward. Here's the real kicker. Since the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse released its horrific findings a few years ago, what comes to mind for many people when they see a clergy collar is not a pastor or a priest, but a pedophile. Instead of an example of Christian faith and life, someone who stands for verity and virtue, what many people see behind a clergy collar is a vile and vicious abuser of the vulnerable. Having brought up that last topic, I should mention a couple of things before we dive into today's Bible passage. First, if thinking about abuse of this kind brings up painful experiences for you, let me encourage you to talk about them in a safe place with people you trust. Second, at All Saints Clayton, we take child safety very seriously because we want our church community to be safe and welcoming for all. And you are free to ask any questions you have about how we promote child safety. Today we turn to the final chapters of the book of Judges, where the downward spiral of God's people through the book bottoms out in a morass of religious and moral chaos. Again and again in Judges we read that the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and worshipped other gods. The final chapters give us a detailed picture of their depravation. In these chapters, like a pedophile in a clergy collar, God's people who are meant to be in the world but not of the world look more worldly than the world itself. First, we see religious chaos. The final section of the book of Judges begins in chapter 17 with the story of a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim. The name Micah means who is like Yahweh or who is like the Lord. The implied answer is no one. Micah's name proves ironic in the context of what we learn about him. His mother has pronounced a curse on whoever stole 1,100 shekels of silver from her. That's a lot of money, the same amount the Philistines paid Delilah to betray Samson. Presumably to avoid the curse, Micah confesses that he stole the money and gives it back. Instead of reproaching Micah, his mother responds by blessing him in the name of the Lord. An interesting parenting style. Then she consecrates the silver to the Lord for the making of a silver-plated image, an idol, something strictly forbidden in the Ten Commandments, where the second commandment forbids worshipping any image. In fact, she only gives 200 shekels for making the idol, keeping 900 for herself. Are there areas of life where you do that, expressing wholehearted devotion to God, but holding back parts of life for yourself, perhaps your finances or your sexuality or your work practices or your treatment of family members. Micah makes other objects to accompany the idol in his personal household shrine, something else strictly forbidden by God, who called the people to worship together only in the place he designated. Micah initially makes one of his own sons priest at the shrine, disobeying God's instructions about priests coming from the tribe of Levi and the family of Aaron, until he prevails on a passing Levite who should know better to become his personal priest for pay. And Micah said, "Now I know the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest." That's not how things turn out. In the next chapter, the men of the tribe of Dan pass through on the lookout for somewhere to settle because they have failed to take possession of their allotted portion in the promised land. They decide to take the idol, the other objects, and the priest from Micah's shrine for themselves. And the Levite is very pleased about this promotion from serving one house to serving a tribe. There is nothing Micah can do about it. He chases after them, but all he can do is complain. "You took the gods I made and my priest and went away. What else do I have?" Micah didn't really have anything to begin with. Man-made religion has no power to save or bless. That is true when the Israelites worship the gods of the Canaanites. It is also true when they claim to worship the Lord but reinvent him in their own image instead of worshipping the true and living God as he reveals himself in the scriptures. Man-made religion has no power to save or bless because gods of human invention are no gods at all. You might as well worship your imaginary friend. Moreover, the religious efforts of Micah and his mother, the Levite and the Danites, are all about getting God to do what they want. By contrast, as Tim Keller puts it, true faith is to give God access to your heart so that he can get you to do what he wants. When we pray in the Lord's Prayer, "Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven," that includes the prayer that God's will be done in our own lives. In the last 3 chapters of the book, things move from ridiculous to repulsive as we see the moral chaos that accompanies Israel's religious chaos. At the beginning of chapter 19, we meet another Levite who, like Micah, lives in the hill country of Ephraim. This Levite has a concubine, a second-class wife. She is unfaithful to him, leaves him, and returns to her parents' home in Bethlehem. 4 months later, he goes to persuade her to return. After a few days, the Levite sets out for home again with his concubine and his servant. It's a long trip, so they have to stop overnight along the way. The Levite is unwilling to go into any city whose people are not Israelites, because that might be dangerous. So they push on to Gibeah in Benjamin. None of the Benjamites show them hospitality, but an old man who also happens to be from the hill country of Ephraim takes them in, urging them not to stay the night in the town square. Is this Israelite town not a safe place? Some wicked men from the town surround the house, pounding on the door and shouting, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." The old man says that would be vile and outrageous, but he offers to send out his virgin daughter and the concubine instead. Seriously. The men of the town don't listen. So the Levite sends out his concubine and goes to bed, while outside the mob rapes and abuses her through the night. The next morning the Levite gets up to leave and finds the concubine fallen in the doorway of the house with her hands on the doorstep. Cold and callous as you could imagine, he says, "Get up, let's go." She doesn't respond, so he puts her on his donkey and heads for home. when he reaches home, he cuts the concubine up into 12 pieces and sends them to all parts of Israel. The text is silent about when in all of this the woman actually dies. An army gathers from all over Israel. The Levite describes what happened selectively, painting himself in a much better light. We all do that, don't we? Rather than punishing the guilty mob, what ensues is a civil war with tens of thousands of casualties on each side. Is God perhaps as unimpressed with the rest of the Israelites as he is with the Benjamites? The whole tribe of Benjamin is reduced to only 600 men. At this point, the rest of the Israelites seem to have a moment of moral awakening. They weep and cry out to the Lord. Lord God of Israel, they cried, why has this thing happened to Israel? Why should one tribe be missing from Israel today? Hang on. Are they actually trying to blame God for the situation? God is silent, and the people take matters into their own hands. They have taken an oath not to give their daughters in marriage to a Benjamite. So, based on another oath, they send troops to Jabesh Gilead because no one from there joined the army, and they kill every man, woman, and child except the 400 virgin women, whom they give to the Benjamites to resolve the wife shortage. Have you been counting? They are 200 wives short. What to do? The annual festival to the Lord at Shiloh is coming up. So they tell the Benjamites to go to the festival, wait in hiding until the young women come out to join the dancing, and then kidnap the remaining wives they need. That way, the rest of the Israelites won't be breaking their oath not to give their daughters to the Benjamites. It's a real win-win outcome, isn't it? Then we read the penultimate verse of the book. At that time, the Israelites left that place and went home to their tribes and clans, each to his own inheritance. It's just like a happy ending, isn't it? Not. You couldn't make up this perversity, could you? What these final chapters underline is that, in the words of Barry Webb, Israel's survival in the chaotic period of the Judges was a miracle of God's grace, as salvation always is. We too are saved by grace alone. The picture of the Israelites in the final chapters of Judges is repugnant. Daniel Block writes, there is not an admirable character in these chapters. No one displays any devotion to Yahweh. No one demonstrates any concern for national well-being. No one behaves with any integrity. The Israelites have become as shameless in their religious expression and ethical conduct as they need to be to get their way. Yet, these are God's people. And if we will look into it, the book of Judges holds up a mirror to the church today. Daniel Block again. No book in the Old Testament offers the modern church as telling a mirror as this book. From the jealousies of the Ephraimites to the religious pragmatism of the Danites, from the paganism of Gideon to the self-centeredness of Samson, and from the unmanliness of Barak to the violence against women by the men of Gibeah. All of the marks of Canaanite degeneracy are evident in the church and its leaders today. This book is a wake-up call for a church moribund in its own selfish pursuits. Instead of heeding the call of truly godly leaders and letting Jesus Christ be Lord of the church, everywhere, congregations and their leaders do what is right in their own eyes. These are challenging words, aren't they? They take us to the final verse of Judges. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. 4 times in these final chapters, the narrator states that Israel had no king in those days. And 2 times he adds the observation that everyone did as they saw fit. When people do what is right in their own eyes, they do what is evil in the Lord's eyes. In the book of Judges, we find that is true of the people as a whole, and sometimes of their deliverer judges as well. The repeated reference to the lack of a king prepares the way for the next stage of Israel's history when they do have kings. But the problems continue and intensify. In Judges, we read again and again that Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord. As the story continues, we read that almost to a man, Israel's kings did evil in the eyes of the Lord and led the people astray. No human institution and no merely human leader or deliverer can rescue God's people and set them on the right course. The book of Judges ends on a dismal note. But the story of God and his people does not end there. It carries on through the procession of Israel's failed human monarchy, bursting beyond the sins of the Old Testament and into the good news of the New Testament, where we meet Jesus, the ruler and rescuer we need, the perfect one to whom all his flawed predecessors point. Today we finish our series on Judges. This Old Testament book leaves us with a great challenge and a great encouragement. The great challenge is to look into this dark mirror and ask ourselves in what parts of our personal life, our family life, and our church life we are doing what is right in our own eyes and evil in the Lord's eyes. In what areas of life are we living in worldly ways, not godly ways? The great encouragement, and the only reason the story continues, is God's faithful commitment to his often faithless and unfaithful people. And Christians know that out of that faithful commitment, God sent his own Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, to be the King we need, a King to rescue us, to rule us, and to reform us. God bless you.